means when I did put that up there as well, my intent when I put that up there, just to be clear, was not that I felt like we needed to list out all the documents teachers should use, because I think that there's multiple that can be picked. But that if there are some of importance or that are influential that we do want to emphasize, that would be the way to do it, to kind of pull it out a little bit more than the way it is currently in our document, which is a bullet point, and it can get muddy in there because of all the detail that's in there. So I like that format is what I'm saying.
If my bias might not be the right word, I think when you mentioned important, relevant, highly influential documents, something I think is very address is valuable that is important for the public that we're talking about. I mean, bias is the right word, but the other documents do need to be referenced and brought in.
And there's going to be, there's going to be bias in any document that, I mean, let's be honest about that. But I think what Larry
well, there's a focus and there's a purpose for it, but again, bias has a pejorative sense that I think it's quite the right one to use for a point of view.
Yeah, perspective, viewer balance, like to show, because students need to understand both sides of the conference.
Absolutely. To read the Federalist Papers without reading the Anti-Federalist Papers is nuts. You don't get the full meaning of either.
Or how the state is responding. So, and what I liked about the seminal documents also was the fact that they were primary source documents. They were trying more and more to lead students to use those primary source documents. And also wanted to be brought up, I think it was Kevin, about having a cultural literacy. And so we do recommend those documents. Then everyone across Missouri has read the Gettysburg Address, has read Eisenhower's letter that he never sent after D-Day, that type of stuff that what we decide might be good for students to know. So
I would just throw out a caution. One of the criticisms of the Common Core that I heard was that there were resources that were recommended within the core. And I think we need to be careful about that because then we get back to some people not agreeing that that's a seminal document, as ridiculous as it may sound in here. But in English, for example, when certain pieces of literature are being recommended to support a unit of instruction, it got very controversial. It got to people saying, you should leave that decision up to the district, period, on what they feel like seminal documents should be. I'm not on that side. I think we should recommend to teachers based on what I said yesterday, but I think we're always going to be open to that kind of criticism from people. So we need to be sensitive when we reach consensus on what those documents are.
Everybody wants to. Aren't those an option? No, I mean, so they don't have to.
Well, not according to Massachusetts. In their document, there were two kinds of seminal documents, one that would be read and one that would be recommended.
That's right. I would recommend, when we're drawing out critical documents, listen to the primary source for the music commission, we're trying to get that argumentation in place with our source. We'll set to the program, a pre-annual statement or that says these are some recommendations. But we need in mind as we suggestions, and I think I saw that in the superior, just as an example. Right. But I think we need to be careful to have good perspectives on both sides of our life, such as we're not limited to. I always good language, primary civil documents such as but not limited to mixed.
Our current standards accomplish that by putting asterisks by things that are locally assessed and leaving those things to the local control. So we can come up with a similar code or other marker that indicates that these are suggested primary sources that would be helpful to accomplish this learning goal. Putting them out there for people that don't make those connections or don't know about those things, that's good. They would say, because often when it's
I feel strongly, still today, and will be, because it's just my position, that if an item is going to appear on the test, or we think that it's going to appear on the test, and I guess we're not going to know until after that, teachers have to know to make sure that they include that in their instruction. In other words, I don't want the Gettysburg Address to be a recommendation, when in reality it needs to be something that every kid reads. And do we determine that here? I don't know.
So let me ask this question. You have your different time periods and you have your key figures. So whenever we recommend to the state board, you know, in referring to testing, maybe what we need to differentiate from is this will be on the test. These are suggestions for instruction for Missouri students to continue to learn. Does that make sense? These key figures, but then there's a lot more they need to know besides what's going to be on the test that we take for one day.
I really love what I did, but I got to tell you, as a teacher, that can make my job so easy, but there's the way that the curriculum is written and the test is done after from outside sources. We won't be able to do that until we see the test. We can make our best guess here, but we won't know it's on the test.
Well, the Missouri State School Board is supposed to construct the test based on our standards. So we actually have control over the test by, is that correct, Mary?
No, the state will hire somebody to do it, and then
Based off of what,
The standards create a blueprint
right,
for whatever the state board chooses to do.
and this is the part you need to remember. Okay, so whatever you write in the standards is basic. And in this conversation, I don't have a problem with enumerating the most basic. And then your school can go beyond that, right? And then what you'll have is a test. And this looks like what Kevin keeps reminding us of. And trust me, I believe kids should be learning, but I appreciate what he keeps grounding us in. And that is, we're going to be held accountable to a number of stakeholders. Let's always keep in mind that if we keep these basic, then we get good tests, and we get time in the classroom for the teacher to have freedom to go beyond the basic. The thing is not to write standards that try to include everything, but the bottom line, that's what a standard is, it's the bottom line. So when you think about your standards, think about how much time you think it's going to take to cover these in the school year, and make sure you don't take the whole school year. Because you need to give discretion to your classroom teachers. Be sure that you keep just the basic information there. Then allow that margin of time to go to the classroom teachers, and then we will have our tests that only test what's basic, right? And you don't have to worry about, did I teach everything? Well, of course you did, because you taught the basics. And then you had a question. That's what's going to help you align. I couldn't go on.
I tried to add to our list. They seem to be also sort of like posters, things that we said we want to value in those standards. And I think Suzanne's motion is to sort of approve those, to get a collective commitment to those ideas moving forward, because we have a lot of detail. So we have perhaps a list that we can help to guide us, our memories, as we look at our standards work in the future. So of course, civic engagement, there's too much there, but the idea of thinking like a historian, using reading skills, coding skills, looking at primary sources, argumentative writing, using geography and economics to make connections, making that part of history, not separate from history, emphasizing global perspectives. Events,
I would just like to propose that we be careful and use social science thinking, social science inquiry, just because if you're looking through the lens of geography or economics or political science, that you're looking through it, you know, you're reading like a political scientist, or you're reading like a geographer, you're reading like an economist, rather than it just being like a historian, if we're trying to make all those connections between the multiple lenses.
How does social science different from historical?
It's inclusive of looking at it through the lens like a political scientist, not just historian, which might be a little bit differently because you're looking at it through that concept. Or even as a geographer, you're looking at the connections of human systems and physical systems to make connections.
Can you give me an example of an historian who did not make things through geographical, economic, and political science perspectives?
And the historian is looking at simply corroboration, so trying to construct historical narratives versus a geographer who's looking at more spatial reasoning causation. So they're different skill sets. So it's not that a historian doesn't use geography, but kind of thinking within the subset of the discipline is slightly different. If you look at the Sapient Framework in the appendix, page 83, it kind of goes through how each field is a Sapient Framework constructed with all of these groups, the National Council for History Education, the National Council for Economic Education, geography, so on and so forth. They each articulate how different forms of economic thinking and geographical thinking and historical thinking kind of play out. And so I think that's what.
And they don't, yes. And they don't necessarily, you're making a good point, they don't necessarily act independent of one another. I think that historians do it often and should think like a geographer and think like a political scientist when trying to pull things together. And I think a geographer might do the others, but they're kind of specific to that field of social studies. And so for an educator, it's the reminder for us to link all those pieces together and not just go from one lens, but give opportunities for multiple lenses to be looked at. Because a student might actually make a better connection going from that spatial thinking piece than from, you know, the political science piece. Because all kids in the way they think are a little bit different. So that spatial type of thinking might be the way that all of a sudden you're like, whoa, now I get it. Or that they can pull it all together. So I think you make a valid point. But we need to make sure that it's all inclusive. We're trying to make sure that we create that cohesion of continuity and change over time, but connections to human and physical systems.
I'd like to register on there a slight mark of concern. I think that is the false particularization of fields and what is simply historical inquiry, which from the start, in fact, a lot of this, it included very much geographical thinking, medical thinking, political science, and everything else.
But you can't argue deny that these fields exist. I mean, they're disciplines. So physics is different than chemistry.
Well,
The
absolutely.
same way geography is different than it. So history, like political scientists ask questions about society and historians too. Now, they can cross each other, and that's what we do in schools.
But what I'm saying is that, and it probably mark this down to my personal dislike is the right word, but work at the moment, gets across the jab between social science and history as if they are somehow different or one is more inclusive than the other, and I disagree with that. But they're just mark it down as, on your list and we go on.
And I don't think these lists will clear your standards work. And I would just suggest that we do have people in districts that teach geography, and we have government, which isn't really history, but history is part of that. I think we're also trying to recognize that sometimes historians let it a little narrow, and they're forgetting about the economic parts or the geography parts, or sometimes.
And I would say that is the feeling of particular historians rather than.
Sometimes we have historians that really focus on ones, like history or an economic view of history, but in exchange for others, and so we're recognizing historians have biases, and they may pick and choose what social sciences are important to them. So we're just trying to capture that thinking, and we want to make sure that we're thinking geographically and politically and historically, and that there's a skills for that.
And I don't want to oversimplify this, but in our school, like many others, we don't have a history department, we have a social studies department. And within that department, we have all the disciplines within that range from a very specific Ozarkia type class to psychology, government, political science. All of those courses fall under the umbrella of social studies, not history. We don't have a history department per se. So
we must also keep a focus on what in the bill was emphasized, and that was geography, history, government, and civics. And the fact is, in reading these other things in, we have to say they derive what happens in history and government and civics. That strikes geography, so course of nature. But
Oh, well, I guess valley lines to country borders and that sort of thing, but, the point is, if you're going to, put the spotlight on a certain section and say, this is what's gonna drive the content, then what's in the law should drive the content, and the others should support that. And that is to give it focus. I think that a lot of the critique of what's going on in social studies is we lost our focus. So that the concern is what I've been concerned about. When you pick documents, seminal documents, and you'll see that that's how I think and operate, that's part of the evidence I brought here to my discussion, was the primary source. The problem is, are you selecting, you might say, leaders of our history because of what they've written, or do you select our leaders of history, like the founders who were the World War II veterans? This is the great outcry in English. But those people have been minimalized, even though they were the driving force. Their values, thoughts, and ideas were the driving force in creating this country. How do you minimize those people and only those documents? So that's a discussion we have to have. Are we going to
Some of that's impossible to have without actually working.
Right. Say it again.
So some of those discussions are almost impossible to have generally, and so we actually get standards and all of those people and those documents, and then I think we can use those opportunities as learning moments after construction.
Well, it just seems to me like that one component of the seminal documents to use or draw out is like one point that we're not ready to actually make a decision on today. So I might recommend that as we kind of record and make some decisions this morning, that maybe we pull that one out and readdress that when we're actually working on it again. So, you know, because it doesn't feel like, if we mentioned that was one we didn't have a good thread across the room on, and I think we still in our conversation. Yeah,
I can see seeing seminal documents in your office.
right, so, you know, maybe we just wait and just like that, you know, I'm not saying get rid of the idea altogether, but perhaps at this moment, we're not quite ready to decide on that.
Something
And maybe
flag
we
for further
can-
discussion.
Yeah, and the rest of them are much bigger ideas, they're not as dependent on the actual specific standard. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I don't know.
I slightly doubt that at this point, maybe the seminal document discussion should be tabled until we dig deeper into the document, the gold standards. And then come back to it so we can have further discussion.
yeah, that's a good idea. What's exciting though is that we're actually thinking about that stuff. So
We're all very good, I think all on the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All on the same page too.
And again, you'll have to forgive me because you all learned this terminology that I'm not used to. But when we're, you know, in relationship to all these things, and about how do we cross, bridge the gap between economics and geography, history, and all those things. I just want to keep on the table how we can somehow make the suggestion
the emphasis in reading biographies of those individuals, those key individuals in this crisis. So I just wanted, because I mean, if you look back to what you remember growing up, what got you inspired about this? What excited you? Was it some facts you learned in the class? You know, I mean, what was it? Something got your attention with history. What was it? Was it a movie? Was it music? You know, what was it? And sometimes it's biographies. And in biographies, a lot of times you learn economics, you learn geography, you learn, you know, I read a biography recently about a man from Liberia who came here. And, well, I didn't know that Liberia was named Liberia because of returning slaves from America. You know, I forgot that. And I learned that from a biography. So I just want to keep that in that.
I think that goes
Overall, like how can we, because, and I realize with public education, you know, the micromanagement of it, and the specifics and measurement, constantly having measure, pressure of standardized testing, constantly measure that stuff. It tends to weigh that down, I think, a little bit. So I don't know, there's a way to kind of.
that goes to our discussion about documents.
Okay.
Our standards really say what students should know, and then the documents are illustrative. Here's some places where you might get to those things, and we can't really thread it in. You should be this, but we will perhaps think about that index where we account significant resources and things that would help students to be able to learn these things in the class, but we wouldn't be able to actually run a standard that requires that.
Well, and then my next question would be, you know, in the overreaching of this, we're discussing timelines, we're discussing when do you put this subject area into this grade level. Should we not somehow begin foundationally with what should seventh graders know? Should they be studying over 3,000 to 4,000 years BC? And then should eighth graders be studying, continue studying local history as freshman moving into government?
That's
I
also
know.
local control.
That's a local control issue. Okay.
So when we look at this document here, we have 6, 7, 8, which is middle school, and then we have the high school. In high school, we're going to be all over the place. They're learning stats, they're learning government, So.
Well, I know, like in the state of Missouri, in fifth grade, you have to have Missouri history in fifth grade. And then in seventh grade, right?
And actually, we actually had that discussion.
Was it what grade? Okay.
Yeah.
In my.
So the elementary school, yes, we're sort of saying this grading order, that's.
Well, I know in the Ohio documents, they specify history in seventh grade, or world history. It's specified in the state standards, so we're moving away from that a little bit.
That's suggest, we have, there's a statute about teaching the Constitution and history.
But that's secondary. There is an elementary component to that.
But
Is there a motion to sort of wrap up our discussion on these?
so should we remove 6?
Yes.
Can we remove table 6 for now?
Is it okay if I don't need it? Just
Right.
Strike through.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think we're saying not to talk about some of the documents, just how we actually include them.
I just think we're tabling the issue for now until later discussion. Right.
So I would approve question consensus.
A second.
All in favor of approving our list of let's call these big ideas for today? Let's say aye.
Aye.
Really, the next item on our agenda was to look at our current standards. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary wanted to talk to us briefly about testing, just to remind us not to get too concerned about that testing.
I don't know if I have
Sure.
that.
national academies to the U.S. Secretary of Ed conducted about the limitations of testing. And this is a part of our history that I think is pertinent to the conversation of where we find ourselves in education, how to learn from the errors of the past, and how to move forward as we advocate for our students. In this letter, what happened was before the Race to the Top application was actually released, the National Academy's Board on Testing and Assessment had convened a meeting, and representatives of the U.S. Department of Ed would be at the meeting, where BOTA, which is the Board of Testing and Assessment, was going to discuss the limitations of an assessment plan. Arnie Duncan released the Race to the Top application before that meeting. And so the only recourse BOTA had was to go through the public review process of their letter, which ate up some time. In other words, the timing of when that Race to the Top application was released and when this letter was released had a very long time frame. The Race to the Top application was published in July. This could not have been October, but it was in 2009. When this letter came out, it comments on the proposed assessment plan, and I'd like to call your attention to page 3 right now. A test score is an estimate rather than an exact measure of what a person knows and does. And the whole point of this is the more you try to expect out of the test, in other words, the more complex you get in your expectations of what a test will do, the less it can actually tell you. All right, and this is the problem. This is why SBAC is failing, why PARC is failing, why states are pulling out. And I'll use Kentucky as an example. The PARC test was administered in Kentucky, and because it could not actually tell what the students had learned because the items were so complicated, Kentucky withdrew from participation in the consortium and devised its own test to make clearer test items. The PARC was trying to get not just English and math, but attitudes, values, and mindset in its test items. When you do that, it's like mixing colors. You get a color purple, which gets different degrees of red and blue. But how much of that is blue and how much of it is red? You can't tell, and you can't disaggregate it. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I appreciate the fact that we think we can move education forward through tests by expecting new generation tests. But with these psychometricians who say, we tried that in the 90s. It couldn't be done. Because the formulas we have now for statistics won't show us how you get the different elements you're trying to test within one item. Does that make sense? All right, so on the bottom of page 6, well, actually, go to page 5, because if you need to say anything to your superintendents, to your school boards, to your legislators, this is what we've been saying for years. And finally, you've got the backing of the national organization in statistics and measurement talking to the U.S. Department of Ed. If you look at theory of action, the theory of action is connecting the dots, explaining in common sense terms which program features are expected to produce, which result in order to reach the final desired outcome. Okay, so in other words, which purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Go to the last statement in that paragraph. If the test results lead educators to shift their attention from teaching to test preparation, then that would not confirm the result expected by the theory of action. In other words, you say you're educating students, but through the test you're actually driving them to test preparation, then that theory of action suggests the possibility of unintended consequences. In other words, you're not really these tests, I know you're in ministry. The point is, teachers are so enthusiastic about education and what we think we can make, empower our students to do. He's reminding us there's a reality here, and that is we cannot force through our standards development the development of a statistic design that isn't ready to be developed yet. And because of that, you can't expect, when I say go back to your basics and standards, is you're going to be you will be accountable to them. You have to keep in your head the framework for the limitations of the test. And those limitations aren't creativity, they're the statistics. Okay? That's why Massachusetts works the way it does. Because the people who designed that, not just for clarity, but for simplicity, understood their tests were going to show whether or not the very basic simple information was gathered. That doesn't, and again, if you keep your parameters for the time needed to cover these standards, then you release your teachers to creativity. So don't put into your standards everything you want to know. Put into the standards what's most basic and what's most simple to get your measurement.
See, and Mary, that's where I think I disagree. I understand the reality. It's a frustrating. It's not being not pragmatic about the reality of this. But I also think that there's an opportunity here to break from the bonds of the test as measurement. And it's a risk we take. Because one thing we can think about is, okay, we can create this really high level kind of, I don't want to say unmeasurable, but unmeasurable in ways in which we're currently measuring learning in our schools. We can create that set of standards and get rejected, and the testing companies say we can't do that, and the state board says, okay, you can't do that, so we're going to get moved to something different. So that's a risk we can take. To me, it's a risk worth taking because my hope is that if we create a set of standards that is asking the construct to be measured in a different way, that it actually asks testing companies, because they want money, to create a different kind of assessment that's going to match our standards.
That's what we want.
Just kind of generally briefly, how do you see that?
Well, I mean, so
What does that look like?
So if you think about it, even the way that we test, I mean, the AP tests and the traditional tests we have in our classrooms are two distinct forms of tests in terms of what they're trying to measure, what they're trying to accomplish. And so if I'm asking students to corroborate documents and say, historically, and I'm trying to extract that skill, then I'm pushing the test beyond tell me when, when that word will come. It's like we're moving it past these kinds of really simple. So we've got to do some of that. I think that's reality. But I think there's also some of this, what can we do to push the standards in a direction where we actually are driving the test as opposed to letting the testing companies in a sense drive us.
So why not leave that to the classroom teacher? Here's where you hit the wall, and that is in the limitations of what the statistics will actually be able to do. And here's your negative outcome, because we're always given it. One, people assume that you can use these results to inform instruction.
Right.
Okay, so that's the other thing is, and this is where we are right now, we're reflecting our against men. Great. We're trying to make us responsible for information not tested. Okay? And so their grades will be misused.
I think I have a perspective that will maybe bridge the gap between the two of you. Standards are often written so precisely in detail so that they're easily measured with multiple choice tests. What we want is standards, what we want are expectations for students that don't necessarily fit the multiple choice kind of test. And that means that they need to think harder about what kind of assessments they do give us, and in the limited way that we're assessed already, their problem. But we want to, but let's not, I think what Alex is suggesting is let's not write our standards just so they're easily tested with a local choice test. Is that
And I think we're talking about the same thing, right? So I think, like, there is, I think we're saying the same thing, I think we're just.
I'm not against any of the project-based learning you want, I'm just saying it's gotta be done at a lower level. And the issue has to do with what you can actually get out of a standardized test. You have to keep that in mind. And that we're already trying these new generation tests, but they're being abandoned by states because you can't, once you enter the human evaluator, okay, and that's what these essay tests are. Once you enter the human evaluator into there, you introduce a level of bias that doesn't exist in the other tests. And you increase the cost exponentially compared to computer testing. What SBAC and CART thought they were going to get was an ability for computer software to read essay tests. And it doesn't.
Okay, I would like to just bring information here. I think that we all probably have the same opinion about test making and even test evaluation after the fact. And I'd like to recommend that we table this again because right now, we wouldn't even know who the person would be that would be developing this test or what entity would or anything like that. And while the human component is the area of controversy, I think, or of ambiguity around, for everyone around this table, it exists in the classroom. You have that human element in the classroom when grading is going on. AP is done that way. It's done at the college level. We will never get rid of that, and we're not going to be able to fix that. And I think that we may get bogged down in this conversation right now when we have a really good chance to move like our standards. Please don't think that I'm trying to push it off, but I think it's one of those things that we need to wait again until we get to the point we can have the discussion. I hear what you're saying about create the basic, and I'm interpreting when you say that to be, we're creating the floor, and we can always, the classroom teacher can always go above the floor, but we have to stand on that floor, and kids have to be able to stand on that floor to show what they're knowing and be able to do at that grade level. If that's what you mean by basic, I think I'm totally in agreement with you, and I love that you keep saying that. But we're creating the floor. But and then anywhere beyond that, the teacher has, or the building, or the district, however that works out at the local level, has ability to expand beyond. And so if that's where we are, I think we need to keep moving so we can, get that done. And the implications of testing, and we have a chance for more voice and discussion too, but we're never going to get rid of that human component, ever. We will never get rid of it.
No, it's not about getting rid of it, it's about understanding what it introduces and minimizing the sources of bias.
I understand, and I think every educator would agree with you.
I'm
But
just
again-
saying, we've got to put the bid in our house, and I explain this to people who have this high creative ability in their personality and character. There's always set of limitations that have to come up with. And what we have, we're going to respect how these tests are going to be used. It's going to be used not just for you, but against you. You have to understand their limitations and work within those limitations. And then leave the rest to the classroom teacher in the district in terms of creativity.
And I don't think you've been an argument, anybody, can I put this in layman's terms, just for my own understanding? What's my brother-in-law, Jeremy? Jeremy! He worked for the Attorney General. Jeremy! Sorry.
Focus.
I know it. So if I'm understanding this correctly, we're kind of like the middleman between tests and teachers, correct? We're kind of the middleman in layman's terms, where we have to make, and I think what Jamie said, we all agree, clear, concise communication, communicable standards, so that teachers understand it and tests understand it. I don't see how, we're trying to divorce the two, but then we can't. So to say we had to table this over that, I'm kind of confused on how to do that, to be quite frank, because it's all kind of together. And so, you guys can figure out how you do that, because again, that's from what I'm hearing, like kind of the middleman. what I'm discussing about hard and smart balance and those pieces, that's out of our control really as to who they end up hiring to do it. And Mary, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm hearing everything that you're saying. And I think that there's concerns about that through educators, parents, patrons, everything. But again, we have to determine what kids need to know and be able to do, and then weave that in. But I think at this point, we haven't even gotten to a point where we can have that conversation. So when I asked to table it, I'm just saying, can we table it long enough to get into this and look at this, and then we can see those implications and have those conversations at that point?
This is a great parent discussion today, and the fact that we need to keep this in the back of our heads, that we have boundaries around it. That's what this is about.
Sam, it's not going to go back up to Mary's comment.
I just want to point out here too that we self-edit to the point where we can get our standards too low. You said yesterday the standards in our first year teacher, it should be guidance. And we have that fear that I think I've always found that whenever you are true to what you're supposed to be doing and the task you've been given, it works out in the end. And I think if we create the best curriculum, the best standards that we can to meet the needs of our students and those points that we talked about, the testing will be secondary. And other people can do that, but I think what we need to, I always wear this prayer box whenever I come to these meetings with important people. It was given to me by former students, and they put a little prayer in that for me and all my future students. And this reminds me that the reason we're in this room is not that group, testers, administrators, whatever. It's about our kids. So if we write this document, we edit this document with the best interest of the students and what they need to live, learn to be engaged, caring, effective adults, I think we've done our job well.
I just want to say that real quick, and I agree with you on this, take a look. But it does say a lot that they would like to change things that they don't think that is what they can use. And so it's good to have an understanding of what will happen with this as it proceeds forward. We understand all aspects that then we present something that are slightly tweak. You know what I mean? So there is that aspect.
My last comment for me is, I agree with you. I think we have to move on, and we get bogged down in this stuff sometimes. However, we also have to have the wisdom to understand that every standard we promote or recommend, it will be assessed. And we cannot separate standards from curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We all, as teachers, know that all of those things fit together. So what's important for us is not necessarily to talk about these things all the time, but to at least have them in the back of our mind. Is this something that all kids must know and be able to do? This will be assessed on some level. We don't know where or when or how or what, but my daughter's going to have to be assessed on this standard. Is that appropriate? Is it an appropriate standard? Is it something that we want her to know and be able to do above everything else that she learns in that class? It's indispensable. So there you go.
Just one last comment. What Alex is saying interests me. Something along the lines of an essay question that gets meaning and understanding from the student, that is evaluated by, my preference, the teacher or someone, I suppose, above that. That would be really, I would like that a whole lot. But a caution, speaking from a programmer, if you're having a computer evaluate this, what you are getting is literally meaningless. There may be some correlation between things, but there's no meaning in what it goes through and picks out and calculates. So, essay, great. Having the teacher evaluate it, fantastic. Having a program tally that, bad idea.
Our district has worked really hard on historical thinking and how do we how do we get teachers to do good work, thinking through primary sources and understanding that text, understanding the source, other sources, how they fit together, corroborate each other. And there are people that are thinking about objective ways to measure some of that thinking without writing. And so I won't get into them now, but there are some really creative and I think valuable assessment methods that are emerging that can still be multiple choice questions, but they're not multiple choice questions based on a fact, but they're about an understanding or recognizing something in a document, recognizing what evidence best supports an idea in a document. So there are things that are out there that are like pretty exciting, I think, that will get to some of these issues. So we might just keep that in mind that this doesn't always have to be writing to accomplish that, because those are maybe things that are hard outcomes for standardized tests. So, you know, it's interesting that the elementary group yesterday, one of the things they did is they broke into 2 groups, and they got big pieces of poster paper, and they came up with a criterion for evaluating standards as they look forward to discuss them. Meaning, what are the things we're going to decide are the make a good standard, and then we would use that as the criteria as we looked at each standard. It's a great idea. And sort of in a backdoor way, that's what we've sort of done over our last day, as even in our discussion this morning, is what are the things we should value in our standards? What should they accomplish? I think we also sort of, in a philosophical way, talked about the idea of specificity. We want a clear standard that does not dictate a specific item in it. So we've sort of gotten that, but I think that might come up as we look at standards further. And we discussed the idea that they should be things that are actionable and interpretable by teachers as they try to implement standards. And so even our discussion about assessment has helped them to frame our thinking about what kind of standards are reasonable to expect in a standard document and whether or not. Now, we don't have a list of criteria there, but I think all of those have helped to frame our thinking about what standards should look like. And so I'd like to move that we move forward and look at the current Missouri standards with an eye towards the standards from other states, things we liked and didn't like about those. What has Missouri got now? And I think we're a whole lot in a whole lot better place to do that now than we were yesterday or even a month ago.
And you know, something in light of that, I was actually just thinking the same thing you said, I think, is to show our newer audience. I don't know if we can do this up here, but I don't think Mary was in the room with Jessica, and we all kind of formulated the standard from the old standard and just kind of how we saw that. And I wonder if we could just start with that, just to kind of give an idea to them how we looked at it and said, what's language that would be clear. And I think it goes along with what Suzanne said, that would be key. They did, the representative will come out more excellent, and then won't have to worry so much maybe about standardized tests. It's going to fall into place with. But I think that's a good start.
Sorry, you're seconding your motions with those raised hands? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you. So, if it's permissible, I'd like to just talk a bit about what I did, and then I'll mention.
Could you switch document or going from?
Did the same email now to the group?
But there's like work, so. It's new format.
It's new format?
Yeah. New format.
Okay. So I'd like to talk through this document so everybody knows what we're looking at. And then I'd like everyone to spend some time with it. Because we all know this is how we do this as a teacher. I would say, here's this document, here's what you should think about it, and let's move on. We really just like we looked at Ohio, California, and what I'd like to come out of this is some really clear consensus items about what needs to be done. What should be done with Missouri, either in format or in the actual way that we're communicating. So, last time we met, we looked at strand 1, which is currently called Principles of the Public. And so I didn't change any wording, just left that there. And we worked on letter A, which is the first item in that, which talks about civic responsibility in a republic. And basically what we did, in the old document, everything is organized vertically. So we have 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, well, the world history of Americans we have. And so it's in that format, it's very easy to look across and to see how a scalar concept gets more rigorous over time. So in this format, it's not quite as nice to do that. So I'm just going to look at that. So Principles for Public A, identify responsibilities that governments and citizens need to accept and to participate in the republic.
Can you make that a little bigger, Brian? At the bottom.
And then I'll go back and get some more. So you'll notice that 6th grade is this page, and sort of finishes up on the 2nd page in the same format. Now, when they printed it out, we didn't quite get the whole thing because I saved this file as a Word 2013 document and it didn't have Word 2013, and so it didn't format on our pieces of paper. Okay, our hard copies. We don't get every single standard because they had trouble getting it in format.
Can you say again what you said about it's not as easy to follow? You said across from seeing how it fits into it's not as easy to follow.
I sure can. Yeah. It was asked that I explain the difference of vertical. I'm going to find 6th grade. This is our current document. This is the K through 8 document. Not decided yet, but a logical outcome of this is we have a K5 group and 6-12 group. And right now, 6, 7, 8 is on the same document as K5. And I'm guessing that those are going to need to be separated. And so when we look at strand, we have a scalar concept in grade 6, and then we have it in grade 7, and then we have it in grade 8. And we discussed how that one scalar concept should be the same idea. It should just become a little bit deeper over time as our students learn and grow in that concept. And so this format helps that analysis out because we see it all connected that way. We see how 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade are all right next to each other with the same skill or concept, and that it's easy to follow that across and to do that work of aligning that upwards. What it doesn't do, though, is when I look at this document as a classroom teacher or as someone trying to develop curriculum around this document, if I'm trying to understand 6th grade, I have to look at the 6th grade column over 36 pages. So I look at 6th grade here, and then follow that column down. There's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing, there's nothing. And then eventually I might find something there, just an hour in history, and there's stuff there. And I've got to go through 36 pages to figure out what's going on in 6th grade.
so my idea was to realign the document so that everything for 6th grade is all together. And so what you guys see is I try to give a header for each grade. And on the left is the grade level. So this is 6th grade. And I gave it a title based on the content that we are currently asking that grade level to do. So we have Principles of Republic, Principles of Government Systems, these are the 7 strands of the blue placement. Continuity and change, this is our history. Economic concepts, geographic study, people groups and cultures, social science inquiry. I'll make a couple comments about these last 3 strands. Generally, in 6, 7, and 8, geographical study is geographical study, and it doesn't really change. People groups and cultures is generally people groups and cultures, and over those 3 grades, that doesn't change. The same is true as social science.
Do you just mean like in 6th grade, the language we're reading here is
It's just maybe copied and pasted.
so we're not seeing a progression.
It's a progression. And it is exactly true that social science inquiry, these things here on the end, for 6, 7, and 8, they are copied. Just like it's true that those social science inquiry standards are slightly different once we get to high school. And we start with world history, that would be our first level expectation for high school. When we look at social science inquiry, it's very never changes that, but of course high school, it is what it is. And I think there's much better language in some of the documents that we looked at yesterday for social science inquiry than what we're currently looking at. So an example of our looking at survey might be, we feel as a group that we can work and improve the social science inquiry strand. And so that could be an action step that we take based on our understanding about what standards you do. Knowing what other people do, let's say social science inquiry could be an action step. We can make that better. And so that would be an example of the outcome based on our examination of the survey document individually or in small groups.
When I look at the curriculum alignment initiative and the way they just wrote it out, so essentially, I mean, this is higher ed, correct? So it doesn't include 6, 7, 8. It's just.
Just what you should be at the history.
But they sort of distributed the information the same way Massachusetts did. Simple, just sentences, had Roman numerals, yeah. This is what you do here instead of graphing. I don't know how you all feel. I mean, what you prefer the graph? I'm asking.
So here's what we do is I like you to make notes about your overall impressions of our current standards, and then we'll do what we did yesterday, is just give everyone a chance to sort of share their thinking about where this area is at, where our standards are at. And then we can sort of come up with some items of consensus that we all feel like, yes, this format works, this format doesn't work. I like that format.
Right. Do we include, are we looking at CAI's and certain standards as well? We want to include looking at that, and it's not just there.
Does everybody have a hard copy? The best way to look at it is the data. So if you want to, if you want to have somebody else. Do we have one more of those?
Yeah, you can have mine.
So the same.
Yeah, I just find it easier to look at it electronically.
So I encourage either individual work, if you feel that way, or just talk with your neighbors as you have ideas, record them down on sticky notes so that we can hold on to your thinking for our discussion.
And one comment from before, if we could have as our educational curriculum document headings that are grammatically correct, that would be awesome. If someone who is so poor with grammar sees this and just flips. I can imagine what the grammar teacher, principles of republic. A republic, republics, Republican government,
Right now.
please.
Yes.
What is the reason I was striking to you? So many points you could reference in the opinion on these.
Yeah, it's, mine.
There's no version
It's
of
kind
it.
of, yeah, you can almost, it's just in the group.
So if you show me
But I think you have. It did for me, and when I don't download it, I go download it, I just view it, and view it.
Yes.
If you just view it, it's
Yeah,
not.
it works.
Yeah, but the PDF would be great if you don't. That makes me sure that.
Oh, yeah. There is.
Question, Brian, are we looking just under the first column?
No, we're looking at, we're making our thoughts about the document in general. For instance, this is our history, right?
Right.
I feel like,
That's what I think should get fun.
like formatting, what is that? It's columns and,
Do we like the columns are arranged, do we like, you know, is it?
okay. Well, I don't think it has to be just formatting. I mean, I think, these are clear. I like the clarity of these. I'm concerned about the lack of clarity of these. I think that those are also worthy. So I feel like personally, we could do a whole lot of that. I think we could fix up the social science inquiry and have it done today. And fix spring summer. I think that is an observation. That's not formatting, it's an observation.
Yeah, so just for clarity, we're looking at format and making comment about content throughout all the columns.
Yeah.
We want to just focus on inquiry at this point,
All the comments.
all of the columns.
Not drilling down to a specific standard, right?
Okay.
General observations about
General
the
observations.
kind of content in the column.
Column would do that. The way we put that lesson in one column class. I think worked well. When we, maybe this would be the question, when we actually get into this, we may take one column at a time, or that we know.
If we continue doing what we did last time, we'll probably need to go back to the old format so we can see it across and we can read if we like this way.
So, which was the second one, systems. It's within the first, and work on that, and does that in the next section. And that would work. And put time with all of these, that's that's another shot, especially the one change here, so that's what we're updating the notes.
Right, and all of those columns are not necessarily related. Right, this is 6th grade, and that's an observation.
Okay,
So
so that,
how we do it.
yeah.
I was saying that just because A and B or G or J are at the top doesn't mean that they have anything to do with each other.
Okay.
They have nothing to do with each other. That's just what happens when we take all these columns, put them side by side. This is what we're asking 6th grade teachers to do. Now, how do we?
Now it's what you're saying. Okay.
How does this work for us? Is there something that we can do with this to help them? Because this is really what we're doing is we're getting a bunch of ideas that aren't really related and saying go. And we're really suggesting any way to put them together. So it's still like it's I mean, when I was doing this, it took me hours, and I kept thinking, oh my goodness. I like that it's all in one place, but right now it just looks like a mess of stuff. It's just a bunch of stuff stuck together. So that made me worried. And I was like, is this a good idea or not?
But it really did show me that we're having a lot of different ideas here that really don't, we're not going to know. We said that we want things to be. That's what. That's part of it.
Yeah.
So this is the big release. I don't really have any answer for this.
Yeah.
Well, I told Amanda that this is, we have government history, economics, geography, cultures, and inquiry, and there's no connection to anything here. Right? So, yes. I know. And so I say, here's the way that we can look to make connections. Now, can we make connections? So how do we help make connections here? Because we have all these things. So I'm glad there are minds in this room that want to. There's no way to make those connections if you don't.
At the moment, all these things are just taking us into another plot. They don't necessarily need to exist. This is the one that we've been. All there. How do we work to make sense with each other? All these questions and moments we make people say, oh, this is They really like one.
It's me time for it. I can differentiate in all of these areas. No, right now.
Yes, there are, at this point, there are no.
And so when I look at stuff, then I go, give me some years. You know, give me the class here, give me some years. Or as a teacher, and then I can go back and I can have those years, that period. And then I can make tests off of those years in that period.
Yeah.
No, I don't, it's not. So I'm here, I think you're going to see that, but we're not there, so we're kind of ready to drive by. So, I mean, I don't know. I thought something to just look at.
Feels like I'm supposed to do all those things.
So when I look at all this stuff, why don't we not break all this into a timeline? And then the next thing is to turn out. I'm doing one thing, and it's even standards. I know they're not doing standards. Standards are choosing the grade level. Other than 6, 7, 8, you can see the middle school is so I don't know if that's in my mind. That makes it up. Time period. It's going on today. What's that? So, I mean, to me, it's a strong history, clear, it's absurd. And I don't politics. How do you really get anything with that? I don't know how to take that on. Because to me, I mean, why don't you determine a timeline? You're responsible. Yeah. And why don't we determine a timeline? And the schools can determine when they want to introduce that timeline. I personally agree with them. Well, because it's not, it's 60 minutes. I think what I think is breaking down by all this and because those two are all these things. This is what I would do. I would be part of the videos. I would get periods. Time period. And then down there, it's very long, it's very basic, it's logical. And to me, that's how you organize. If you're looking at science council, okay, well, we're looking at it in the and if they want to interconnect conflicts, they're going to connect on that time. So, I mean, they do all of us.
receiving sort of topics.
How was the seventh grade on? Sixth grade.
I always start going, no, so this is my class, it's actually, but it's clear. And then have service. Why are we not doing it based on time period? And then you have, you can see your, then that allows us.
But it's, I'm just saying, it's really hard from 12 to 40 years.
I started, Friday night, it's really hard.
But then you have.
Sixth, seventh grade.
And we're just looking at format, you're not working on. That's what we were saying. This would be I just wish there was some way. Some connection between all that stuff. Just because it's side by side doesn't mean that it's necessarily
Collins suggesting.
That is why I that would almost look like a replacement just in the social studies only way. No, that's obvious.
A very long time.
Summary of that's just great. Yes. Yeah, we were talking over there about
Yeah. This is the goal, mystery.
So the PUB, oh, I know, this is more of a, here's how I you start with, you're going to state the sign, to get people understanding what's going on, you're saying, at this stage, your first day, you do this, second grade, you do this, and that's all you need to know. But if you want to know if people are teaching, then you have to go back to this. What's the best way you can know about
Right, yeah. Rather than have to go through this
In other words,
Yes.
we have conversation, we should go on to synthesize words at the end. You know?
Yeah.
To me,
I think what they're saying is sixth grade history, you can do sixth grade, and seventh grade, in 2 years from now. I think that's what they're implying with that, it's like, so over those 2 years, you can do all that sixth grade stuff.
And you're studying all the races, the one that's that time period. That's
My-
going to help that student remember that time period better than just kind of discombobulated. And then, so in high school, you have all these electives. You know, as a high school, you can determine that, so especially when we high school, they have these courses this year that determines that. And that will, and we'll go over that time period. Granted, you can have a backdrop in the beginning of the previous two years of study. So that you have the contract that's having the student, you will have a contract with how you're entering into the new time period. So that's your review. I don't know that right now it's going to be a big put on my turn to grow. And I think it's trust me, Jamie. And it may not. So the students are really don't know how to work with them. But American history and all that. But I think we're going to just start to say what this is. So people have to, I mean, I just think it's down so you but then when you're saying, I'm more about time periods, writing, and different levels of start. I think the time period, and maybe they're not this career, and what happens, they're not. Don't, I have to change the culture to affect the next time period. So to not use that as a foundation for me is, you know, by giving them years, so we give them years. Actually, not years, that's set.
So you're saying this is how we categorize curriculum.
Or as we categorize our daily curriculum, yes, it also helps the teachers to know. I'm looking at this from this time period about these time periods. And it's, you know, they may not have textbooks, the textbooks are talking about this and Brandon and right about it. It doesn't teach them anything they don't remember the days and they're fortunate. Right. And so that's that in my well, I think it's a history and that's so we find. It may be that we need to combination, it's a lot of information. So now I'm going to say, I don't remember specific years of the period, last period, road period, I can't remember all that. I don't see, yes. Okay. So that's, it was advertised. And that's not the job. But we're going to try to be refreshing ideas.
What do you guys think? What's the most effective way to format or looking at Massachusetts, which elaborates versus bullets.
Yeah, and you can put that on there, and you put that. That's not yet, okay. But ours is included. Actually, I put on both. The name. It's just the name sentence that we're not quite sure what it means, and then it's still bullet, those things that are good. Yeah, that's everything. And the other thing that we were looking at is we were right on that piece on the tools of inquiry, needing some direction. Yeah, okay. Locate is gaming, identify somebody that are synthesizing and interpreting and analyzing. But it's the staff, they
6, bring your vote.
Tonight. 2
It's
layers.
just 2 hours.
Not even that. Maybe by our 40. Yeah. 40 side, 40 like that.
It doesn't make sense to have 6, 7, 8 doing something and then we don't do those anymore, but now we're asking them to do something. It may not be harder.
So it's like, let's start to look at rates. I think but I don't like how that's right.
So they just as
And I can see, I see more data that multiple areas that where I work
And yeah, high school not necessarily government at the end of the day. So they can't really become the hardest. Same skill.
Well,
That's where I'm like,
And what can, yeah, what kind of technology, what kind of research, what kind of presentations? Do you think we'll be done with our thinking by 10:30 or getting more time?
yeah, so we can take.
It's a nice idea.
Yeah, to get an idea where we're going.
So, how about we say between 10:30, 10:40, take a break, at 10:40, we'll have our thoughts and share them out. And if we feel like we need a little bit more time on certain issues, it's going to
Are we clear that we're seeing it there?
that's what we're doing. What we can do is,
You know, like.
one of us
Right.
we're done. Use that for code or two.
Right, but appropriate tools, reflecting, like, let's, the modern, availability, something like that, but I do think you run the risk,
Don't have your ears.
where it's, maybe the teacher says, hey,
See, the one above was distinguished between fact and scenes. If you want to use class and see, well, I'm not supposed to do that. But right now, I don't know.
And that's it, and some of it's that, process, to
So we should remember to make sure that's included in our policy. That might take care of that kind of focus statement of use technology. It's not the technology that is, it's the environment,
Well, in fact, it's very complicated. So like the best way to do it, it's not a seminar.
so why do you think, like, let's just go short. That was somebody who
Yeah, I got this thing.
Well, if you do something like that, it work, which you can do. So we're going to see. Overview, which is just a PC guide, essentially. And it just has some options.
Yeah. Oh, and
So negotiated with the group, and it's not necessarily from a single standard, but just those things that we can run. And I've created a place for people to interact on what they've done related to each concept. So it's not going to be used as but this is a place that people come in and say, as I address this super question, this is what I did, this is what I did, here's what I did in my class. And we get people collaborating that say that I have to be face-to-face, or sometimes it's the so that each unit has that. We also have picked a video writing program to build on. They build over time, so they sort of start with the more simple, but video writing. Should we ask you to practice a little bit of that? So I'm trying to do all of these things. So we get a little bit of spaces. Very specific, also not just the data that you know, but also what they do as they accomplish. So lots of stuff accomplished together. Some of them are better than others, and that is our way. That's I will learn this on this by sharing this. That's what we're trying to change those second statements. I could evaluate a success of the progressive movement by or to. Now, we have a website where I take these things and I put in documents and other articles and other things so that they can click straight to a text that they can use to help us.
I said I had to look and get it.
So you can
I just see
but our website is
yeah. Yeah, we do, right. We're not gonna go later. I would just say these out, that's because, sure. We're gonna share it. And very much now, New York Skaters, for the audience. When I'm thinking of this, I'm the graph, and I'm going to do, this is what I want to do.
I think everybody's sort of like now thinking visually, which is good.
Yes, I think that this is where we want to.
I wonder if we're going to come up with one solution.
Okay. And this is, this is what determines what time, what we're looking for, that would be what's in
correct?
For 6, 7, 8, we're telling them.
Okay.
Everybody's got some history.
Sure.
In high school, they're
Well, okay, so we're still not,
saying.
this is what's great. But we do things based on the years.
I think
got
so.
revised paper is classical, so I say classical, which is what, 1750 to 1850 or whatever. Just era, classical era. So we're dealing with eras, okay? Now, I'm pretty much doing one before that, which is so then you're looking at, in that same period, you're looking at geography, economics. Tell me what you remember key strategies, then you're looking at.
I don't remember this.
Yeah, yeah,
And now I took, this was initial, so we got to think through this stuff.
and in that time period, so in history. So this way, the time period dictates. And then if they want to put grade 7 years, grade 8 here, some high schools want to do 9, 10, or 9, and 9th grade they have to do dark year economics, government, they have 10th grade, and they have to have this, that is done in that paper. And that way, it connects, and then they learn that here, all those subject matters, and they learn these stuff here. And it just goes, to me, that's how I would, and that is not maybe, and I learned history that way now. It was a master's in class history and what's going on.
Yeah,
Or I don't know,
this is.
I remember the time period, what areas this one in. So we may not start.
I'm not sure what you're thinking about this, but right now, with this grade level difference,
So we really,
is not only step of thinking, but also historical awareness. Kids do get remember the things again. So right now, we're doing different periods of history in different grade levels. Never just repeating the same.
this is what actual, that's what I know, but it's got to decide. So like,
I don't mind what this can do. They're all different and it's not.
And you're
also
also,
okay.
so this is what I need to know. This is time, place, vector. This is the courses, primary, secondary data, abstract charts. This is, what am I going to do?
It's in there, you listen to things, and then you're done.
I told you, just take me a minute.
It works.
I said, just give me a minute. I go down, I'm super, I'm like, my brain is connected where.
Okay, so we're doing compensation is standards. So key concepts.
So this, would be increase. So then you're, and that's, I believe, that's where you went to school, these things here. So we could retitle these, I just started to believe that. It was very distinct. So like this would be, principles, responsibilities of government, that this
They're
would
talking
be.
about like pieces
So
of
then it would
this,
actually.
making sure that we talk about this period of time, that we're addressing all of these actions, and each of them is one of them, and then all the other ones.
This would be, so.
So
Yeah. So you put it within your context of which. But see, this is now, certain. They're all still teaching. And they used to do this year in history classes where they don't have this, and everyone making stroller drivers. So I did that. I think this will.
yeah, it's sort of like, it doesn't have to be a class, it is thinking, Missouri is looking, right now, they're actually,
So like.
would always talk about geography,
This is
not necessarily having geography.
what it is.
No, you're right, it's an easy progression to follow. That's what
Always
we
bringing geography, that makes sense.
So you know what I mean?
So they're
You know,
very involved with
science
things,
is, and then
not
you're
trying to
looking
separate,
at.
silo, kind of average geography class. We're gonna do that geography, that's what we talk about the class.
Right, I would imagine, and I think that's,
So that's what I'm saying.
that's what that is. I think it's clean, easy, and.
I just don't think
And
we're
it
gonna
doesn't
get
require us to fill any other box.
people to think
Yeah, I mean,
that
it's.
everywhere is the same.
Well,
What
the
we're doing is
goal
make
is
connections.
the goal is
reprioritizes the place. Like it still is honoring the context, but it's reprioritizing what's more. It's doing whether. Right.
So.
Right.
Right, I want to start here, I want to start, right, I want to start.
We start with the river valleys.
It's not, it's right. It's kind of a blend, so, like, you might do declaration.
Previous.
A little bit here, you're gonna still. But I can put in another point, so that goes.
Around that time period. So,
We're gonna have to
you
share
know,
everything.
Mesopotamia.
But there's time. That's me. Right.
Uses the concepts and services.
Yeah.
Calendar dictates.
I was at 13 minutes, was the first question, oh, I know, I was just, I know, that's processing out loud, I was hearing you, I thought, let me show it.
But when I'm thinking about all these different sections, I'm reading this stuff.
And don't say you're
I'm so not necessarily.
feel free to fix it, but I'm going to process it, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna take it now, let's try, I can just throw it all on your read out, and then it's out again.
And so in a year, that might be you're saying 1,000 years.
No, I said, I was like, just give me a minute, I was listening now, we were little steps
See a lot of people in that
Key concept, kind of,
time period,
and here's how, time period, is it the books? No, I didn't.
everybody.
I assumed you would.
I hope, you know, that everybody's thinking and then we all sort of like generate some ideas, and there might be a crossover, you know, between our ideas. So I think everybody can get something different.
I've got it in my mind now.
Yes. This is really, I think, this part right here is really
Right, but also you have the migration part, that's part,
the actual writing stuff, but if you don't do the brainstorming, your big
Was
ideas,
it this way that you
then
can?
nothing else is gonna work for that.
I think that's why it's basically kind of a template.
Right, each subject matter has to be covered in that time. There's gonna be more some than others, right? There's gonna be some properties or residential, not as much of that going on. But, that's just saying.
Yeah. What's really interesting is
Oh, I-
any government in 6th or 7th grade, and 8th grade, boom, like, we could probably.
Because he covered that.
6th, 7th grade, and then how 8th grade, right now we're not really doing that. This is our chance to think about those goals and help everybody out. So,
Things that are measured, I think this is very measurable, like, I gotta get it down, and explain. So the teacher can look at that and go, okay, I need to pull out information from this time period, key people, economics, trade, what happened with people groups, culturally, how do they people, how do they almost spread, that's how I see that. So,
we'll see how everybody sort of starts
but I think it's
figuring
simple,
out ideas.
but it doesn't make it simple. And it allows for that creative ability just to, and they're inspired our kids with read, inspire their kids to read, and watch different things. They're going to write, and hear all this stuff about them, and they're not right, and when I'm still watching my sister. It might be,
Well,
especially with texting and fast-paced
saying
efforts,
this,
it can
we
be a
all
little
have
bit.
some share information, but it's those rich details that make history interesting.
Right.
And the silo stuff, that it all comes out, and it's all this little thing, it's like this own little island of information. I don't care about that. You know, it's like, when you read a story, or you look at some rich content, the kids really do get interested in the details. The details that they can connect to, because they feel that stuff. Like, we string away all these messy details too often.
Yeah.
And then it's boring.
And it's measuring facts.
This is why, when we get the history books, the strategy a lot of our teachers are using is, okay, what does the history book say? What does the history book do? That's for giving us the basic information. So then we go to the primary sources, what people actually said and did, read those, and then we can go to this is all the history book helps give us the timeline, but then we can go dive into the repeat of history.
The last couple of years in simplified. History books are important to the marketing. Oh, here's so documents and
Yeah, I think when we get, and we're not a well-off district, but when we get places in the hands of kids, we can go out and search for those wonderful sources, and we won't even need a textbook. We can do that work on it.
But you know, sometimes when I'm looking at computer screens, I've got this thing when I'm looking mirrors and I'm more distracted. I'm reading this book, you know, like I can read this little thing, and I'm just like, we're making comparisons where it all happen.
And here's the thing, as a teacher, we're gonna look at some sources, but I can only prepare so many sources. I don't know where our conversation is gonna go. I don't know if the kid is gonna want to read so-and-so's account, help them learn more. I can't anticipate all those things ahead of time, but I have a kid has a laptop or tablet, and we all agree, man, let's read this document, because that's where our conversation went. We can all go to it right then, and it eliminates that having to look up all these papers.
Washing machine. My grandparents love and, you know, but I think even with history, it's like, okay, we kind of grew up with the textbooks. It bored us to tears. And now we want to, but the things that we remember all is that we read on our own. That's what we remember more, you know, library selections more than any history class. Unless we have a non-history teacher. Right? And it's not always fit. But I also learned, they're not all like you, Brian.
We're trying to get our teachers trade books or, you know, classroom libraries, for those primary sources. Those accounts, those are expensive. We spent last summer since $1.5 million for teachers. And even those books were delivering. So
I know what you're saying about getting electronic, and I like it. Well, if I could have people book, I like that. I don't do all the time. I'm very all the original I've got the total. Here, I got this.
yeah, what is my blog?
Yeah. I got this one a few months ago. It has all these great.
I just like being able to find.
I like being able to find things in reference and pull them. Electronic is fantastic.
I could get rid of it.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. I communicated that to you. You have to communicate it because of me coming around.
Everybody had a chance to take a break. Did you see that?
And we were to the last meeting. Brian?
My scone was a little require the elementary group really to bring in snacks for everybody.
No pressure, Brian.
Yeah. I didn't listen to the job description.
Sure.
They're bringing snacks, they fix it up.
Yeah, they'll be good bringing the snacks.
Wow.
Where are we gonna find
Well, that's because they're the.
I mean, it's.
some?
Yeah, it is.
I think this keeps hanging out, so. All that stuff.
Did we have well, we're jumping out.
Here, we'll just look at it and then I'll send it again to see if
Is
it's.
it,
real.
is it Google Doc or is it
No, I sent it.
Word doc?
It's a Word doc. Okay, it's right, it's right. Okay, well, do it. Okay, we're gonna show you. Weird, something or whatever, well, and, no, that this is correct. I'll try again. Let me just try again. Did you get it? Well, I'm cleaning it up a little bit. Okay, ignore the titles, and even don't look over or anything like that, because we're processing. So what we did was, no, I was just explaining to you what we gave you. You were late. First, no, no, I was. Okay. So we did was this take. Thinking about the constraints, since we said we are beliefs, or what we value beliefs, things, we gave ourselves. I know it's been so, based on what I did, it was that. Check it on, so this would be social science, so that was true for us. And so this is one of those pieces about the other things. All of those things are based then by chance of time, or like as we say, very quickly, we see these things to do it. So there might be more to this than I thought, but I will, isn't it like? I mean, should have done it. I did. Freeze down the lines of my software. Oh, looking at something that the master was out, since we're over here, you want the lights back on. Because it's very good. It's just a relationship. You just one more minute. Oh, there. Yes, it's Brian. they want to mess with like no.
Yes, it could be, yes, it could be, because you might be analyzing and these are all the standards, it's not anything, these are scores, these are standards. So they're.
And you just, you want to have it, just as long as.
Say, we take away resources.
Well.
And then share.
Well, we can talk about that, but this is, I don't know, we just have this, but this is where we see that piece.
Hey, just do you guys mind, should we just, we'll decide how we want to go around, but do you want to explain it to everyone, you know, I mean,
I don't necessarily need to go first, but I
no, you got to go first, but
Yeah.
whenever it's your turn, then you can kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is the exciting part, I think, and I don't think we could have done this without doing what we did yesterday and having the sessions that we had. So I think that we would have looked at this document the way we just did, if we had done it. So thank you for all of your thinking. This is the hard work, really, and I do it like Julie. We did, this is the big idea, the big sky work, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty of writing, moving, adjusting things, and that will feel different, but this is really good. This is really good. So, we're gonna go around the room and share our big ideas, and we're gonna look for places that they fit together, and I don't know, do we still want to break for less than 11:30? 11:30 is still a good time to stop for lunch? Okay, we'll see if we get there at 12:30. Larry. We're gonna start with Larry. And then we'll go this way.
Well, this was kind of, it was kind of a team effort, or sometimes two, or sometimes three of us. And one of the first things that we noticed, we made a nice point, was cut and paste for people, groups, and culture, and social science inquiry. And it made, the verbs are staying, whether it's sixth graders or 12th graders, they're still doing the same thing. They are locating, they're describing, there's no progression expected of the students. So our thought was there ought to be some different verbs in the later years compared to the earlier. They should be able to analyze and evaluate and synthesize by the time they're in the 11th and 12th grade, not just locating and identifying. I think I saw on some other slips up there, other people that did the same thing.
Yeah, that was specifically trans 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, that's right. There were three strengths. Geographical studies, people groups, culture, and social science. Yeah, and the second one was on format, and that was really driven by what Karen had said, which had to do with how do you present this to the audience? And the audience is the grades 6 through 12 teachers. So that should be the format that you had on the screen, or should be something else?
Well, just in an effort to save time, I think we should just make it as user-friendly as possible, or whatever that ends up looking like. I think ultimately when this gets in the hands of the people who have to use it, we can't leave any room for them to not understand what we meant. And we need to be very clear and concise. And I like the format where complete statements are written versus bullets, because the clearer we can be with people, the better.
And I
think we kind of agreed on that.
And then Mary joined us, and I was talking about that particular layout up there, that format, and she suggested that might work well as an appendix with the preceding pages being complete sentences. I get that right?
Well, what I was saying is that these graphic representations are very, very helpful when you do preparing press to see what we want. And there are going to be people who, just as we're discussing, want more depth and understanding what they're doing. And so this is like our working document that can be as an appendix to show how we connected the dots of the content. However, what Kevin and Larry appreciated about the Ohio format is that because you were using sentence and paragraph form, there was more explanation as to how you interpret that. So I think this is extremely valuable for us, and we need to use it as a working document, the foundation. However, there are people who are going to find that bare bones and sparse and need more support. So that's where the format that you have got. Don't hate me, but I think we need help. And I think the working document can be an appendix of that, where you're going to need three sections. You're going to need the intro as to what it is we're trying to achieve with this philosophical underpinnings, and the process that we use to come up with this. Then you're going to need, and that's in Massachusetts document, that very well. Then you're going to need your standards, your content, your themes, an explanation of what are the expectations under those things, and then you may need to see what we see. That there are no goals because we were able to, in a very concise way, compare and contrast.
Any other thoughts later? Those are our two contributions.
Are you like? I love how you hear somebody else say something and you almost read your mind. That's really awesome. Like you were saying, we have more beliefs than we realize. And I was sharing that with Brian. I think he had a lot of it too. I like this format because I like the bullets. I like to separate things out. But I think it's advantageous to have both, just like you were saying. Only instead of, for me, instead of an appendix version, I think like when you hand that teacher something, she has, to me, I would have it all together. And so instead of it being like an appendix section with the standards all together, right? So on one page you have your, as you're saying, Ohio and Massachusetts did it as well. We have their written down, paragraph, explanation. There's different types of brains for processing information. We want to be able to facilitate everybody's type of thinking and what best gets done. And so I like combining both of that. So you hand your sixth grade teacher her package, it's all together, and it's got both combinations. It's got the paragraph form that explains it out and is more wordy, and then it has the bullet points where she can mark off, you know, I wish we both put together. So I thought combining those a good idea. I think the final page 1 had an example of the overview as well. Oh, Ohio was just page 21, yeah.
To clarify, based on our conversation, that top versus grade 6 and theme for the year, and then there's a paragraph, sort of a narrative of the year, and its significance is when you talk about narrative and that explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I can read.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, looking for the else, there's a nice context provided for that particular. It's not just
Yeah.
all bullets, not saying it by itself, but there's context. That's nice.
instructions, the continuity and change, the actual topic should be moved forward. So that was perfect. And then I brainstormed with this group and was amazed and confused at first.
So your first comment was?
Just, I think that the actual topic of the study should have moved on.
History stuff, like
Yes, like you're studying the colonialization of the New World, or you're studying the American Revolution, that should have moved on.
That becomes the foundation.
Yes, the foundation.
Just
Okay, so I guess to kind of piggyback what he was saying is, if you pull that up, we were brainstorming over here just that, we talked about the bird things, we talked about those core values, for lack of a better way to put it, that we decided on this morning, those 5 things that we felt like we all had consensus needed to be in the documents, which in essence is the social science inquiry strand, albeit perfect as it is or not, that kind of is the piece that we're saying has to be there. There has to be a common thread throughout the curriculum or the standards 6 through 12. And so what we did, if you don't mind, sorry, the teacher to me, is we tried to create a template on how we could kind of shift and modify Brian's template a little bit so that all the strands are there with that core focus or that foundational focus at the top. So we took 8th grade as a sample because that's the cleanest and easiest to do. So let's pretend like the beginning of the year we're talking about really colonization to independence, that time frame. We could call it whatever, not a big deal right now, but we just use that as an example. So there would be some kind of overarching or background statement up here related to that. The social science ideas that we had in those 5 things we agreed on really came down to that there's key concepts and conceptual understandings that exist within this time frame under history, under government, under geography, economics, people groups, and cultures. So basically you're taking those standards and putting them here so that we're saying when we're talking about colonization and independence, these are key concepts and understandings that actually would be hit upon. And then when we called it evidentiary sources because we were looking at all the different phrases we had in those 5 things we agreed on. And so when we're talking about evidentiary sources, when I say sources, don't think primary or seminal sources. What we're thinking about is actually research, data, maps, graphs, charts. It could be a primary source or a secondary source. It could be a biography, whatever that is, we would pull those standards, and if it's directly related to the history, it would go here. If it was directly related to the government, it would go here. So for instance, or geography. This time period is heavy geography because of the different regions of the colonies, and so you might have those actual geographic sources that you would use, maps, graph charts, that would be listed here, economics, so forth. And then this piece is the action that kids are being asked to take, or the civic engagement they might be asked to take with it. So how are they going to show their understanding of analyzing this information, synthesizing this information, and what are they going to do with it if under this time period they're doing something with it. So it might be a argumentative type of writing. It might be civic action. It might be participation, if you will. Or it might be that they're identifying the point of view or that kind of thing. Those standards are in there. You can pull them in and put them in the right category. So they're actually pulling this all together. You're seeing all the lenses within the context of this time frame. Now, this would happen for each chunk of time, or if this was geography, it might be regionally, this region, this region, this region, which could be mixed around the order in which they did it, but then they could see all the different lenses and then how the social science inquiry falls in as well. We felt like this was a nice blend of all of the documents that we had read and the values, those 5 values that we had. And, you know, Mary, you were talking about statements versus bullet points. You have both kind of going on here. And remember that we're not doing the curriculum, but this is kind of meshing it together a little bit more for those districts like Kevin's, where they might not have as many curricular resources, people needing to come in and work with teachers, and because you mentioned that earlier, but this is a place to start that's a lot more than what they had before, so we're trying to create that balance.
Yeah, there's a difference between support and micromanagement.
Right.
And you want to stop at support.
Right, but the thing that's unique about this is we're not taking certain standards that only go here, so let's use the Declaration of Independence, but it might be, if you look through, it's going to be under the government strand, and looking at those pieces, you might find it here in this time period, the context of time, but you might also find it in another context of time. So teachers are starting to see that it's not just a running list, laundry list, that they're like, okay, cover that, okay, cover that, that it doesn't go away. You know, that's why it's actually kind of spiraling throughout the course of the course. Yeah. And so are these lenses. So again, just a sample, don't look at typos or anything, computer processing, creating visual, or grammar. We're going to put data on that to make sure. But we were trying to combine it together so you can kind of see what it would look like. And again, then we could actually put those pieces in where they go and work on the verbs. And in fact, I'm processing out loud right now, but it might even be beneficial if we decide that something like this would work before we work on verbs to do that, because then we might see that we could actually go deeper with the verbs, because if we're connecting those lenses together, kids actually can go deeper with it than what we thought.
And just to help me with this, because I think you're onto something here, but I want to pose a problem and see if we can, if this will solve it. One of the problems I have, and Dan brought it up yesterday, is that ideas actually take generations to develop, and what we see in our Constitution started with an analysis of the concept of republics back from Greek times. So what I'm seeing, or what I think is possible here, is that even though we're talking about the American Republic, if you do it over a period of time, and you keep that strand American Republic, you can see how it developed through time before it arrived in our Constitution. That is what is missing. That is the dots that aren't being connected in terms of we arrived here today because on the shoulders of people from
I think a key word that Jessica said was spiral. This is something that comes back around, and with this, I think
This is your
that's
chance
an opportunity
to create that contextualization too, moving in. So these chunks give you that chance to kind of create that contextualization. And that's just as you see contextualization, you see continuity and change, you see causation, and you have sourcing going on here, you have action going on. And if we keep, you can use this format in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade, even high school, but we use 8th grade because it was the cleanest and easiest and everybody's the most familiar with, to give the sample real fast and kind of hash it out.
But what it does is instead of plopping the books of John Locke and so forth into a cell on this grid, you start seeing in time how it penetrated down to influence people.
Yes, so it's not
Yeah.
it's not relegated to that one
Right.
bit on the timeline. Declaration of Independence, 1776, great. 1860, Lincoln is referencing Declaration of Independence. It's coming back, spiraling back.
Yes,
And you can see it develop.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was saying to Brian, when he said, you know, look at this, they're not connected. I said, they're not connected. How do you expect the students to connect?
Yes.
Now, I will say, we hashed around on this because this is teetering on curriculum a little bit, but I think by keeping it this way and putting the standards in, we still, because the fact of the matter is, I don't care who you are, the time periods, and help me here too, Larry, at the higher ed piece as a historian, political scientist, there's key periods that everybody agrees on. Whatever you call them, it doesn't matter. There's still chunks of time that everybody, and even as parents, you would agree that there's kind of some shifts in what's happening. So whatever we don't even have to give it a name, we can give it just a content statement and have a paragraph, whatever, we can make that decision, but this is just saying, hey, you know what, nationally, even internationally, these are agreed upon chunks of shifts in philosophy, time, chronology, whatever, trends, patterns. We're identifying them to make it a little bit easier to process. And then for, districts who need it, and that is now starting to show how everything is fast together. Without being pretty long.
Okay, we'll have if it's a clarifying statement, let's keep moving to that, and we will have a chance to give everybody a chance to talk, and then we'll go back and really sort of pick apart this and we like this format. So keep comments, just really quick clarifying comments. We do that this time. And I'm excited about yeah, we give everybody a chance to speak their ideas before we
Are we moving around?
yeah.
Yes, so
So,
you're up there.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I forget about myself.
She was over here.
I talked a lot about this same idea, the idea of our static verbiage, and the only thing I would add is in my brain it was making sense to at least have 2 layers, because the way our courses are taught, a middle school expectation and then a second high school expectation. But I noticed this and feel like this is something that if we do nothing else, I think we can do this to make tremendous gains in our standards. And then I also was lamenting in the test and create term that when I look at standards documents arranged the way most are, where they're not in any way linked to a unit of study. As a teacher, I think in terms of a unit of study, or at least periodization. And so I was complaining about the fact that this is better, I can see 6th grade, but it still doesn't help me think in terms of my world as a teacher. So it really then prompted Jess to solve that problem for me.
Processing on that.
As a teacher, what I think this adds to teachers is it allows you to anchor the requirements in a framework that you understand. So I understand what colonization to independence means in my brain, and therefore whatever's typed in there has more meaning to me. I feel better prepared to deal with that. But that was my own comments.
I have nothing else to add. Most of the ideas I think have incorporated in Jessica. I decided that this uses skills, content research skills. So I always appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your work and trying to think through how we can layer this out. I 100,000% agree that time periods help to give context to our standards, and they help us break things up. And we just make a list with them. It's really hard to know what is going on. It just doesn't flow very nicely. And so chunking that up breaks up the course a little bit and allows us to have some goals for each one. Knowing what it felt like to cut and paste things, I will just state my thinking that there are a whole lot of geography, economic, and culture strands in our current standards, a whole lot, and we won't be able to plot all of them in every unit. It will look, the chart will be ginormous, and so we will just, my first belief will need to give places to practice each of those thinkings, not ever limiting a teacher, knowing that they'll need to do all of them throughout the year, and they can make connections that are different. We're going to have to limit what geography, economic, and culture standards and strengths go in that to make it a usable resource. Otherwise, we're going to have a history concept,
full page of geography straight for every single period, which is going to be really full and messy. So that's just my opinion. We're recognizing here the limiting columns helps. Just having a format, having columns, you can start to put a whole lot of information in there. So what you may recognize is this is recommending that in this format, we have government, whatever we call that, as a column, rather than trying to separate out process and government systems. And then that is one.
Be careful with the titles. I just threw that up as a placeholder. Know that we could tweak any of that. I just needed to.
And so I just wanted to be noticing that we're to make all those connections clean and easy. We have government. And I think that can be done and still hold small on values that we're holding to. So, okay, good.
What everyone else said, I think, tell them what you can tell them what you told them, real important. And that top folder, the top placeholder, what we're saying with the Massachusetts, that kind of overview, here's the goal of what we're doing, is what we're trying to cover in a language, person-friendly kind of way. Oh, I got what you're talking about, we're trying to get out of this portion of this here. And then, this I think fixes what was frustrating me and Julie and Jane mentioned also. You need a timeline, you need to be able to see, or exactly prehistory, exactly classified, what are we looking at with there? And being able to style it up, I think is really good. The Colvin part, once you've got through, may need to still be tacked on there. Kind of what we had in the previous. I don't know, do we need an appendix or something like that? We'll see that as we go through. But language especially, like what we had in the previous. If you look at the standards as they are now, there's a lot of kind of words that are there and catch your eye and tell you nothing. And what we kind of felt that would participate and so forth involves the student and the teacher using an idea of what you're trying to get to. There's something happening here. You're not just cattling off particular words and topics. I think that's the direction.
I'm just stating that because I know how hard it is to figure out by this machine. Several things jump out at me. I appreciated where Jessica was going and where you're coming from as a teacher. And I think what you're saying is probably taking more depth from what I'm getting ready to share. Dan shared it. And when I see history, I don't, when I look at a lot of these standards, and I'm coming from an objective point of view because, again, I'm not in a classroom and I don't have all the accountability paperwork and all that you all deal with. But I see a lot of cumbersome, loaded down, mumbo jumbo when I look at it. And I think we need to kind of give it some wings to fly, to be honest. And for me, if I were doing this, it wouldn't be, I appreciate this right here, and I think it's a good, very good layout. Again, I like what Jessica had to say a lot. And I like the start, because you have to review, you need to, because a lot of kids are getting it, and there's a thing I taught them. And so you need that review, it's important. But I would never do it that way. I think history should start out with years and time periods. And then you put your subjects, you put your coursework or your disciplines underneath those years. So you have 4,000 BC to 1,000 BC, and you put geography, and then you put economics, and then you put government, which there wasn't a whole lot of studying in that area.
but you understand what I'm saying. I would put the disciplines in relationship to the time period. And so the school, especially in relationship to high schools can decide what grade level they want to do that. But if you have a geography class and you have a history class, your high school can say the freshmen have to take geography, economics, and history, and or maybe you can need one class. I don't know how you do it, but they're going to cover those subject matters in this time period. And then you grow. You go to the next time period, and then the next time period. But you can always piggyback on the previous time periods as you do that in this spiral. That's just what you're doing. As you add content, grow in depth of knowledge, you're still able to input previously studied things. You're just not putting as much emphasis on those things this year. And you know, I think what I'm trying to say. But, so I think we're kind of all in a very interesting place because we're thinking the same thing. Like there's something missing with a lot of these standards when I'm reading, and I think and when I heard words cohesive and how do you get cohesive, cohesive like numbers, years, and then you can go and these years, who are the influential people? And some people may say that's a list, but and then you learn the economics from that year, and those kids really get that time period. They're grounded in it because it's heavily studied instead of kind of all this class is studying this right now, this class is studying, and it's just kind of drive by and these random strands. And I see that happening with my kids in school right now. And I'm just kind of like, do you have a foundation for why you're studying this and this? And it's not a very good foundation. And I think that makes sense to teachers what years they know, okay, I'm studying classical era right now, so I know I need to pick out economics from here, history from here, if you have one teacher who covers all of that. Or if you have 7 teachers, so as they get older, they have maybe more classes in that depth, and so their depth of knowledge goes, how does that make sense?
And I think, I'm sure I read across it as you talk, so there would be like year markers, this would be one band of this week.
Okay.
Down, instead of doing it by course, it's by the topical, like history,
Well, and I think you will do a better job of implementing more in depth how that might look on a chart. But if I were to chart it, the years would be on top.
Right.
That to me makes the most sense to go, we're looking at these years. So what did economics look like? What did history look like? What did cultures look like? What did, how did people move? What caused people to move during this time period? And then that progression naturally happens to the next time period. And it's not complicated. And then as they grow in depth of knowledge, you are, that fluidity just naturally happens, I think. I think teachers would have the ability then to have some flexibility. We're not being it's not micromanaged. And it's opening up dialogue in the classroom to get kids interested. When kids are interested, they're going to write. And they're going to write better for the colleges. And I think part of the problem why they're not writing is because they're bored teachers in history classes in public schools today. I hate to say that, but I think that's a part of the problem unless you have good history teachers. And that's, they're going to say they're all not good, but maybe that word is you connect. You connect with that teacher. Sometimes it's just a matter of connecting. That's what's good.
Does this capture better what we were?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And to me,
Is that, and sorry.
and as a teacher, Jamie, does that make more sense to you? Because you talked about timeline, the time periods, categorizing things, and then I'm going to implement the economics for this time period. We're going to talk about economics, and then we're going to talk about history. Go ahead.
I see, does this make sense? It does to a degree. The problem is that we offer discrete courses. And so it's, as a teacher, it's more clear for me to have a time construct, but link specifically to the course I'm teaching. Where a world history course actually is typically arranged very similarly to this, and if we're looking at a world history, course document, that really is what it does. But I do also want a delineation between world history, American history, government, for the sheer practicality that there are so many historical examples that I want
to be able to say, okay, Kali, who is doing American history, I really want you to be responsible for this, and I want to be responsible for this, because I don't want people going the same examples for our students. So, well, at some level, the course separation is important.
Well, and also just that when you teach
But
this,
I like the chronology.
well, I think chronologically that is just the way the world works. We live on a calendar. But also, there might need to be an understanding that as we're writing standards and creating new tests, we actually might be shifting how we teach a little bit. And that there needs to be an ability to do that. Teachers have been so loaded down and so micromanaged in recent years with No Child Left Behind, that it has clogged their flexibility, freedom. And so it may be that there's an adjustment in how we teach. And if there's some collaboration going on with you and the geography teacher, so you're not covering the same things, there should be some collaboration in the social studies department for that, I think.
All right, let's make sure no one can limit discussion on whether they speak and then we can have open for anything.
This is actually my curriculum, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm and your ideas in that. But when we are covering 4,000 to 2,000 BC, in that short time period, there's a Chinese culture, there's a Mesopotamian culture, there's an Egyptian, there's an Indus River Valley as well. So the problem is we do live by a calendar now, but that's not the way societies existed or started to exist. So at the same time, there's civilization, we also have the Icene and Ocean, who's still in the Neolithic period. And we have Sub-Saharan Africa, which is in the Paleolithic era. So it would be, if all of society was on the same track, that might work. But because we're all over the board, and because history, as I always tell my students, when they want to do the diagram, they want it to all in there, because it is not nice and neat, it's the real book. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't. So by doing it by topics instead, or by societies, then we're able to cover everything in a way that makes sense to the kids. Because if I'm covering Egypt, Mesopotamia, all of this at the same time, it's going to fry their little minds. They are not.
I'm wondering if we're balancing on that splitting point between framework and the classroom activities. As a framework, we can summarize generally, we would say in this era, whether we're talking classical as a whole or Athenian, we want to be covering this part. And in the classroom, then you can say, okay, this happened in 350 BC, and this happened in 250 BC, and here's that timeline in particular. I would hope that's happening in the class, but if we try to put that at the framework level, I'm just trying to imagine we're back to 36 pages would be a long, wistful, happy memory. We'd be up into hundreds trying to get this out. I'm hoping that in some way we can, if it's not obvious, get that idea across. You need to be looking at this in the times and show how things progress from one point to another. But I don't think we can reference that in a general way, other than this era and this area comprises.
But I would think it would be general, and then I would think you could have your schools can determine what age they want to teach this time period. And I think American history at some form or civics can be taught every year. That's somewhere.
I'll put it in order. We'll give everybody a chance to speak once so that we can get everybody's thoughts.
Mary is actually our speaker.
Larry was first, we didn't know.
Mary commented on did you actually get to make your
He asked her to jump in because they were in the same discussion. It is lunchtime, so unless you got like a really quick comment, we don't want to cheat you. Would you like to start when you have the lunch? Or do you want to have a word?
I just have a couple of things to say. The New York standards might be addressing what Julie was talking about, and so you can take a look at that for a format to see if it resolves concerns from both parties. The other thing, I keep going back to the 7 standards here, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I just want to make sure that the 7 standards are represented, not necessarily in 7 columns across that grid, but that we are sure to address all of these assessment standards at every grade level within the framework that we use. I think everything that needed to be said was said, and I'm grateful.
Okay, so we've given great support to all our ideas there, and we'll open the floor for a general discussion after lunch. So we think about thoughts, you need to write them down, so we're good. So we're leaving again. Let's come back at 12:45 for a break.
You're welcome to leave stuff in the